all can see me. I've just gone live. Okay, and we have a guest author for you today as well. Let me just see. Yes, we do have our guest author. So sorry for the noise that you might be hearing. Just pulling him in. Okay, yes, we've gone live with him. Absolutely great. Hello, sir. Hi, how are you doing?
Hi, good evening, Aditi. Thank
Can you
you.
hear and see
Fine.
me clearly?
Yeah, sure. I can hear you.
Perfect. Great. It's so good to have you here. So let me just begin with a short introduction for myself and the platform that we have here, and then I'll begin with yours as well. And how would you prefer I address you?
You can call me Shibu.
Okay, perfect. That works. Thank you so much. So, hello everyone. Hi. It's such a great pleasure to welcome you all back again to yet another discussion of Sunday Live with the authors. And as usual, this platform, this amazing interaction that we're having right now is brought to you by My Secret Bookshelf. They are an online bookstore and they have a virtual book club as well. You can log on to www.mysecretbookshelf.com or go to the link on their bio. And I'm your host, Aditi Chandak. I'm a chartered accountant by profession and a writer by passion. I have been writing as a student journalist, as a blogger, and now as a novelist. And my debut novel, Under the Crescent Moon, was published last year. Joining us this evening is a man who left me speechless with his bio. And I hope the same experience is what you will be going through in the next 45 minutes or so. Kochery Shibu, the best-selling and award-winning author of literary fiction Men and Dreams in the Dhauladhar and Faith and the Beloved, is an alumnus of the prestigious National Defense Academy. He has served in the Indian Navy and commanded 2 warships. Post his retirement, he also executed hydroelectric projects in the Kaveri River Basin in Karnataka, Beas River Basin in Himachal, and Teesta in Sikkim. And wait, it's not done yet. I have more. He holds a postgraduate degree in Defense Studies from Chennai University and MA in English Literature from Pune University. That is the man we have today. And I have so many questions for you. I am so interested in knowing more about your life. So, sir, over to you. How have you been doing? What is this all about? I mean, this is amazing what we have here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aditi. Of course, the writer in me has been something like you, it goes back to my school days.
Right.
So it has been a long term coming. And as a
Oh,
career
wow.
soldier, you do not take time out to write anything other than, strategy, tactics, and
Mhm.
military and warfare,
Right.
anti-submarine warfare, and torpedoes and missiles. So till when I was in the uniform, so the writing was focused on that aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Tons of it must be lying, gathering dust in some, corner in the classified corners of the naval headquarters somewhere. But
Okay.
truly, I
Okay.
could take time out to write only after I came out and I started working in a hydroelectric project. It was a completely
Wow.
different line.
Mm-hmm.
And the first novel was a very deliberate effort to tell the story of the life of very ordinary mortals in a hydroelectric project and the
Mm-hmm.
extraordinary things that they do, which
Right.
makes our projects come live. A life and a story which is never been told, to my knowledge. I've
Mm-hmm.
never read about a similar thing before.
Okay.
So I said it should be told. So the first novel
Mm-hmm.
was a deliberate effort in that direction, and it was a mix of genres. So I had one third of the book was the classical style of writing, very slow,
Okay.
and it's about culture, tradition, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And one third of it was the background of the project and a little bit of technical aspect. You can call it technical fiction, or let's say the technical background. And another
Okay.
one third was a thriller which was weaving through the novel, and the how the environment, the subcontinent, has the
Mm-hmm.
good and the evil, how it pervades to every facet of your life. So that's how the
Okay.
first novel went. So the first novel took me about 4 years in writing, 1 year in editing, 3,600 man
Wow.
writing hours. So it's quite a
Okay.
quite
It's
a
quite
quite
an
an
effort.
effort,
Absolutely.
and fair amount of research.
Mm-hmm.
The second book, it took me half the time. It took me about 2 years and about
Mm-hmm.
1,800 man writing hours to complete. Again,
Okay.
a whole lot of research in it. But second one is, let's say, straightforward, a crime thriller, but
Mm-hmm.
with a lot of authentic information
Okay.
relevant to our Indian history and history of India and the recent events in the our history of India, and to which I've tried to give a perspective. So far, yes, it has been it's quite of enlightening to me as a writer.
Okay.
So always you feel that with each novel you have churned yourself or maybe kind
Mhm.
of questioned or chastised yourself once again. It's kind of being
Right.
reborn with each novel.
Okay, that's very interesting. And when you say that you picked up writing post leaving the force, when you picked up the projects that you were doing, so how did that come about? I mean, did you always have ideas even when you were on the force? Because obviously, with most writers, that's what happens. You always have ideas in the back of your head somewhere. You just need to pen it down. So was it the same for you, that you always had idea? You were always writing for yourself, and then you decided to start writing, for a novel or something of that sort?
Ideas, of course, see, in even when you're in uniform, so I used to be
Hmm.
in the think tank of the kind of for some time. Yes,
Okay,
thinking is very important. So, that they say battles are fought and won in the minds of people. So, unless the
absolutely.
mind is sharp, you will never win a battle. So, the application of mind and imagination and creative thinking, and you have to be as good as the best when it comes to the warfare. So, when you're
Hmm.
there, you're focused in that line of thinking. You're always thinking in those terms of what is it that you can do, what is it that somebody else can do, what could go
Right.
right, what could go wrong. There's so many things that need to be thought about. It's a very vast area. So whilst I tried writing fiction in
Hmm.
survey, then I realized that it very difficult because you're so much into that service stuff, you just cannot write.
Right.
So
Okay.
then you channelize your energy into kind of focusing on what you're doing. So it's only after it came about and you start working in a new domain, then of course you have had ideas which have been kind of pent up for maybe about 30 years.
Understood.
So
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of giving them shape. Yes, I agree.
Hmm.
But the first novel always is a kind of very, very serious learning process because
Okay.
what I thought was maybe a 5, 6 months work finally took me 4 years by the time
Hmm.
I completed. So it's like that. So I guess the process of writing and
Hmm.
the process of learning and tuning or maybe orienting one's mind
Hmm.
to be vast enough to get into the shoes of each character, imagine him or her, and get into the nuances. So you do not have the luxury of somebody else. You have to be, if you have 6 or 7 protagonists in a novel, then you got to be in the shoes of everyone.
Yes, I think
Quite
because
a
there are
challenge.
three
Quite a
main
challenge.
protagonists in each of your novels, right? I mean, that's what I
That's
read.
correct.
Like
That's
there are
correct.
three main at
Yeah, yeah.
least. Hmm.
So that itself was, the character sketching and
Okay.
getting into the shoes of the character,
Mhm.
then relating to the environment from they come from. So fair amount of research,
Absolutely.
reading to get
Hmm.
into them till you feel the pulse of that character. So
Right.
possibly I
Yeah.
also take it that when the readers say your characters feel live, I think that's possibly one of the best compliments you can ask for. Say, okay,
I agree, completely agree. So this
then
is what I'm very curious. You've mentioned research a lot of times. You obviously have an eye for detail because the way you started, you mentioned how many man hours you'd spent writing the book. So of course there has to be an eye for detail in you as well. So just curious, what were your research methods? Were you just reading? Were those first-hand experiences? Did you also spend time with the people you found very interesting, learning more about their lives? How did you go about with the research?
so research in my case, what I do follow is that I follow character sketching in the beginning,
Hmm.
even when I'm not firmed up on a plot which I'm writing. So,
Got it.
in the sense that, finally, that doesn't matter what kind of novel you write, the novel it's always about people,
Hmm.
and people are the ones who exist on the earth and not they cannot come from somewhere else.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
they are existing on ground, but then you cannot copy paste somebody who's already existing and then put them into a novel. That will become biographical. That will not
Hmm.
serve the purpose of fiction. So what in the initial substantial amount of time. So whenever you travel, meet somebody, or you read about somebody, read about an event in a newspaper, or maybe on a television channel, something out of the ordinary about a man or a woman or an event which has taken place. Register it, and if you think that it is usable, make a note and keep it with you.
Okay.
So there is a
Okay.
whole lot of collection of information which is built over a period of time. And then I do have a habit of kind of vast reading, so
Okay.
any kind, any kind. So wherever you
Hmm.
find something interesting, you capture. So as a preparation to the the writing part. In many ways, it's something like, preparing the ingredients for a feast. You're not decided on the menu, but you do know that you're going to generally require,
You
a
do
whole
need
lot of
these
stuff.
items for sure.
So I guess so.
Interesting.
That's how I used to start. So, like when I wrote this second book, when I was writing, I had about 200 characters in my annual, from which
Okay.
I selected maybe about
Wow.
six or seven. Six or
Okay.
seven, and then worked on them. And as you move along, as you start writing, of course, the characters evolve. What you have written down is a sketch.
Mhm.
When you
Absolutely.
think of a plot and fit them into the plot, then of course that you have to further flesh out the character, develop them, give them more
Mhm.
details. And each time when you move on the character, then of course there is always a research. So on the time period, the place that you show them to be, or the background that you show them to be, and of course you cannot, the characters that you created are fictional, but then you try to
Absolutely.
interact with people from that background or similar background. So there is a whole lot of, yes. It cannot be only academic research. Then of course you will
Mhm.
not get the, what I call, the pulse of the character in it.
Mhm.
So it has to be with, there has to be a certain amount of tempering with real people, if not
Got it.
directly that person, but somewhere connected to the field. So that is always required. It does pose a challenge sometimes. It's not
Mhm.
always that you're able to get into the domain depending on what you write and how you write. You possibly, say if you're writing about a jail, you cannot get into a jail and live there to write, but okay. But
Most of
you
us
have
can't.
to, most of us cannot. So I
Yeah.
guess it's like that. Also, for that matter, if you're talking about a criminal, you cannot be a criminal, nor can you go and live with
Mhm.
criminals. But you can always kind of extend it and then to meet as close as you can and do come across people, etc. So there are a lot of things that goes into research. One is, of course, the academic part.
Very this part where you said, you can't go in a jail and live, or you can't actually be a criminal. So when you're doing your character sketches, this is an assumption that I'm making right now, please correct me. When you're writing your character sketches, you don't just focus on the physicalities of the characters or certain nuances of the characters. You're also trying to understand where their character comes from or how their psychology is. Is that why you mentioned that, the piece that you just did? How
That is
how
correct.
in-depth is
See,
your character sketch?
substantially. That means, for example, now let's say in my second novel, so I've got characters. Let's say the main
Hmm.
protagonists are, the IIT, IIM kind of lady from a rich family is one end of the spectrum. You have somebody from that, the caste oppressed Hindi heartland. Somebody who comes
Mm-hmm.
from the poor background, who's second kind. There is third
Right.
guy who's, an out and out, let's say a victim of the LTT struggle in Sri Lanka. So
Hmm.
each of them come with different, very, very, very different backgrounds.
Okay.
So when you get down to each of them, so physicality is possibly least of the challenges. That I think is,
Mm-hmm.
tall, dark, handsome, or whichever you want to
Right.
describe them. That's least of the challenges. But
Mm-hmm.
to get into the mind of the people, as how does the mind work? So and define a character in the beginning,
Hmm.
and of course, then you have to stick to the rule. Once you define a character in the beginning, you cannot
Absolutely. Yeah.
make the character jump because it doesn't suit
Hmm.
your convenience. So then you have to be very careful about what you defined as each character, how he or she,
Got
and what you think that the thought process and what they will do and
it.
what they will not do, etc. So yes, it does require a fair amount of more than a fair amount of involvement. And in this second book, what I've done is you have in almost two or three of the protagonists have to cross the line in their life wherein they're doing things which they would not normally do.
Right.
So there comes a point in where they have to take a decision wherein do they stick to the norms of the society and let your watch your dear one suffer,
Mm-hmm.
or do you cross the line and you think it's the lesser of the evils? So
So that's
it's
where
not.
character arc comes in.
That's where the character arc comes in. So
Got it.
the transformation of the character from the
Hmm.
from the beginning to the end of the book. Of course, one tries not to be judgmental.
Hmm.
I leave it to the readers, but I'm sure not all the readers will like all the characters and what they did and what they're doing. It may not appreciate all, but then I don't think this is meant to be a Gita or a Bible or a Quran. It's just a
Yeah, and
fiction
you can't
novel.
sugarcoat everything.
You know,
You
so
have to
it's,
say it sometimes.
so I guess it takes in that spirit. So yes, it's a
Okay.
very, very, the most important part is finally
Hmm.
what I say is that, behavior of an individual is a reflection of his or her value system.
Absolutely.
So unless you define and understand what that system is, value system is for that individual, it'll be difficult for you to work with that.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes a fair amount of research. So what that will not come into the surface when you're writing, but you have to have in your mind in your research. Okay, this person comes from this background. This is the environment. So therefore, this is the bandwidth, the value system into which he or she is being fitted into. So a lot of nuances get into it, but I suppose that's part of the art and skill of writing, on knowing the environment. Whilst the full background stays, you're only talking about a character which is moving. But yes, the full background has to be there in your mind when you're writing. Otherwise, it will not come through.
Yeah, no, the reason why I was actually asking this question is because with a lot of people, I've realized that they're so focused on what their story should be, how they want to start it and how they want to end it, that often the character is not really, deep enough. They end up giving really shallow characters, or they end up describing the characters rather than showing the characters do whatever the attributes are that they've put to the character. So often I have found that character sketches seem to be, very shallow for people who are just beginning, because they're more focused on, what should my writing style be, or how should I really be ending it? Is there a twist I should be giving, or is there something mandatorily that should be there in my story? So because of all of those reasons, because you said you had 200 character sketches and you culled out whatever you needed for your stories. So I thought you would probably be the best person to ask, how are you going about it? Because what you're giving to the readers is just the plating. You've obviously done a lot of research behind it. So that's why I was curious as to how you went about it. And this is pretty interesting. I hope it helps some people who are hearing here.
Sure.
So great, wow. So while the inspiration for Men and Dreams and Dhauladhar has, of course, been the projects that you worked on, what about Faith and the Beloved? Is that also from certain experiences that you had, or maybe first hand, second hand, heard stories, or is that completely fiction?
There, of course, the story is fictional, definitely,
Oh.
but the events that are many of the events that are mentioned are historical. For example, I have
Mhm.
covered the, let's say, Mumbai terror attack, which is a historical event, as background to
Right.
the events which are developed, or the
Mhm.
demonetization, which was again a recent historical event, or
Yes.
let's say the activities of the LTTE in the subcontinent, which
Mhm.
many of the new generation may not be very aware of it, but they were kind of very major part of our Indian society for almost 3 decades. They kind of, they were the fulcrum on which all our countries' thinking and functioning had come around. So one of the events I mentioned in the story is that when this Sri Lankan civil war started, there was an event which took
Mhm.
place, which was reported in the media of a Tamil family being burned alive in a car,
Okay.
and they had kept the children out. Their 2 children were not put inside, and the father from the
Okay.
burning car comes out, pulls the children out, and takes them into the car and decides that the children should die with them.
Okay.
Now, this at that point in time, I'd kind of, when you read about it, it was kind of what is the word? Bone chilling to know that the father, the
Absolutely.
plight of the father,
Yeah.
he loves the children, but then he prefers that they may be better off dying with them than being left at the mercy of the mob.
And the fact that this is not fiction, this is actually something that happened. So that is
This is
further bone
an
chilling
event which
because
happened.
it hits
Yes,
you.
that's an
Mhm.
event happened. So
Hits you
it
worse
was it
because
was
this really did happen. Mhm.
so based on that, of course, one of the characters built from there, where of course that guy whom I built is not there in the story. So here you're saying there are 3 children and two are taken by the father, and one guy's left to live to fight another day, and then story is built around him, and his whole
Right, right.
rise on death race to avenge his parents' death, and he'll do anything, whatever he thinks that he needs to do. And his father has told him that he must live to fight another day and fight for the cause.
Mhm.
So, and
Got
that
it.
kind of becomes a thread, and he goes on doing it, irrespective the environment is over, the war is over, the fight
Hmm.
is over. Still, he's going on doing it because he still believes that's the only thing he can do. So
Right.
that those are the kind of things when which are it does happen. The war or civil war or traumas
Mhm.
which happen to people when your family gets killed in front of you, or your near and dear ones get killed. Sometimes for a large number of people, then there is no logic in reasoning after that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's
Because
let's
then
say
there was
that
no logical reasoning for whatever happened to them. I mean, it wasn't fair to them. So I guess
sure,
that's just
sure.
how they do react. Yeah.
So let's say to this extent that this is kind of inspired from a story like this, an event. So an
Mhm.
event which is built upon. That's a event
Right.
in your background, which is and it stayed with me for quite some time. This particular event,
Mhm.
which let's say that's one. Now let's say when you talk about let's say the caste operation and the problems of the caste in our society, which is
Hmm.
No, there was an effort to bring about, our independent struggle. And that time, even at that point, our Baba Sahib Ambedkar had fallen out with Gandhiji for saying that, the Congress was not representing the Dalits adequately enough, even at that point in time. Of course, then subsequently they made up and they moved to the Congress. So there was a movement in the heartland where people are talking about Genevu Andolan and said, anybody can
Hmm.
wear a Genevu, why only some people? And
Right.
so some
Right.
aspects of history, which is
Hmm.
given a twist, and how events had panned out in the 20s and 30s, till leading up to the let's say independence struggle, and subsequently one of the things that we brought out is, let's say, the caste operation, which
Hmm.
is happening in, let's say, the Hindi heartland somewhere.
Hmm.
And the guy, when he comes out, he comes to maybe Bombay, Delhi, and he takes it out on women who have nothing to do with that caste war where he was victim. So
Right.
the issue is that when you have a social issue which is not addressed adequately, it will reflect in our society. So that's again,
Hmm.
so based on some real events, again inspired and brought out. And then of course, then there is a story about one of the when deliberate effort to highlight the capabilities of women in that emerging society, or women
Okay.
as business leaders, and where traditionally there's
Hmm.
resistance to the even from the business houses, where they believe that running of businesses should be a men's affair, and even if the women are capable, they're kept out. But there are women who have proved their capability as good as anybody can be. And there are people who are IIT, what we call the Ivy League of India,
Hmm.
that the
Right.
IIT, and people who do well and have done well. So I've been trying to bring them out. So individually is, if you say for the heroine, for this heroine read A, and for that villain read B, no. But yes, there are shades of truth in
Hmm.
inspired from people whom I met, read about, events which I read about, correlated. Like so many things which are that's part of the research. When you
Got it.
build in a background which substantial amount of research gets into it to get that kind of nuancing done. But
Hmm.
yes, there is no let's say no character which is a copy paste of anyone who's living or dead. But
But
many
it
aspects
is
of the characters
inspired.
are
Hmm.
inspired from the people, similar people who have in shades of in
Absolutely.
one particular aspect from one character, etc. That rest is fictional. That's as an author, that's your job. You take a little bit and then build on it.
And that just makes it more real, because you know that it is from everyday people that this has been built. It's not really about something one of us cannot do. So I think that just gives you a bit more hope. There are other people like you. There are other people that authors are looking at and thinking, that could be an inspiration for me. So that just feels more at home for me, at least.
Sure, of course, of course. It
Yeah,
is. It is always there. I mean, one of the things is what people say. You don't need to go to America to have a dream. There was a
absolutely.
stage because before the Indian economy opened out till 91,
Hmm.
there
Hmm.
was nothing happening in our country. In the sense, it
Right.
was all everything was kind of there's some government jobs, there's a laid down way of
Hmm.
doing. There was nothing for people to look at the inspirational stories of something which you could someone breaking the mold and making it big, and such kind of stories are never there. But after 91, 10 years down the line, then suddenly you find about people, the IT sector success stories of people who have made it in business, startup. So India is a happening place, and there are enough things happening. You do not need to read an American novel to get inspired, or do not need to write
Absolutely.
about stories about Americans to say that people only dream there. That was, yes, it used to be true. But after we opened up the economy and created opportunities for people, it's not the best of places, but definitely there is enough for people to get
It's not
inspired.
worth it.
It is, it's but enough. It's if you have talented, if you have the
Mhm.
inclination, there are enough people who have, in the last about 15, 20 years, there's so many of them who have broken barriers and, from rags to riches stories, which otherwise was unheard of in India. I mean, other
Hmm.
than through a criminal route. Otherwise, the only way guy,
Yeah, I mean,
breaks
a
a
lot of
barrier
it
is,
was obviously through families. So I think at least that's broken off. You don't need to be from a particular family to make it big here. So at least that I think has broken off now.
that is true. Yes. If you're talented, yes, there are avenues for you to make it on your own. And your entrepreneurship setup, even today, of course, largely the family-run businesses and family-run business houses still form the majority. But there
Yeah.
is enough opportunity for others, which was not there before.
Mm.
So for people who write and people who read, so it's always fantastic to read about people who come from, to give an example, like speaking to somebody. See, the IT sector, how it changes people is, A girl from a rural village is good at studies. She makes it to engineering college. She does engineering, joins an IT company. IT company likes the talent, and 1 year down the line, she sent to once to France, once to Germany, once to States, and three journeys, and she's a completely transformed person because the amount of
Right.
confidence, exposure that you get, you're not,
Hmm.
that it changes you, and then you find so many people like this who suddenly feel, their horizons are so vast and so broad. So there is a
Uh,
community now which has become like an IT community where they believe that there is a world of IT world
yeah.
where it is well beyond the traditional Indian system of caste, community, religion, language
Yeah.
barriers.
Yeah.
So it has been able to create barriers, and then they feel that they can do together, prosper together. So perfectly fine.
Hmm. No, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the way it should go. You can't really put yourself in boxes all the time. And I think through writing, we really realize, because when you end up writing a particular character or thinking of a particular sketch, you realize that this person cannot just be this. They are a lot of other things as well. So, for example, I might be an author, but I am also someone who loves maybe dancing, or maybe I love going out and helping kids in NGOs. So you can't put me as just an author. You have to understand my various other facets. And I think that's what happens, at least to me, when I end up writing character sketches. That you can't just think of what that person is doing professionally. There's something that they want to do personally. There's something that is inspiring them to be this way. There's something that obviously pains them. So when you put all of that together, I think you also understand that when you look at normal regular people around you, it's not just one view. They have multiple facets to them as well. So I think it becomes difficult for me to put people in boxes. So I hope other writers also pick that up, that you just can't focus that हाँ ये मतलब अगर बैंगलोर में है तो टेकी ही है, or he's just going to go to US or Germany. They'll obviously do a lot of other things as well.
Of
So
course
that's
they do. I
interesting.
mean, but again, as I said, that character sketching is a very intense and a very let's say challenging part of writing.
Mhm.
So
Right.
that depends. That's if you're. I mean, if there are people, if you just want to make a love triangle and don't get involved in all this and only talk about how the heart
Mhm.
is about to burst or has burst and how you're trying to repair it. Okay, that is another skill set which is required to
Yeah.
write and another type of writing. But uh, any writing doesn't matter whether you're writing about love triangle or mythology rehash, which is very popular in India
Mhm.
again.
Yeah.
Mahabharata from ABCD's perspective and Ramayana from
Mhm.
XYZ's perspective. So then, okay, the story is known to everybody, but you give it a different perspective and then say, okay,
Absolutely.
you're to look at it like that. So it doesn't matter whether you do a mythology rehash, whether you do a love triangle, or whether you write a crime thriller, or you write a classical style. Classical style is of course the most challenging. It's
Mhm.
phenomenal time, effort, and the talent to get a classical style well going. But everywhere, unless you do quality research and get into the real nuances and details of what you're doing,
Right.
then, of course, like you said, it'll come to that. One is shallow characters, and second, next is shallow writing, both.
Hmm.
And if you club the two together, then of course, then it was terrible. Point zero 0.02 to point zero 0.02, it doesn't help.
Got it. So while of course, I mean, I'm sure even your so while character building is there, there's obviously something where at least I structure how I want my story to be. I at least for my first novel, that's how it was. That I knew where I wanted to end it, and I knew there had to be certain moments involved, or certain places where I wanted to fill in, or maybe give the character a different arc at that point in time. So I had planned all of that, and then I started writing it. That's how I went about it. But what about you? I mean, of course, it would have been methodical, but more than me, less than me. What was it for you?
It has got, the way I write the stories is, as you write, yes, of course, you have a kind of very, what do you call, a blueprint in your mind, not fleshed out,
Hmm.
but you do have kind of
Right.
something in your mind
Right.
when you start writing.
Hmm.
So you pull out your characters whom you think, fit into this.
Hmm.
So to me, in my case, both the first book and in the first book, it took me a long time. So as you start writing, so there are a number of characters, number of events, geography, time, space, even a whole lot of things. So I used to have a whiteboard where I used to write
Okay.
this character, where, what time, what he or
I
she doing,
wanted
what
to
the
do that.
timeline.
I never wanted to do that.
So that used to be there. So because as you move along, so every day you start writing in the evening, and half the time you used to go in just updating your mind to where you were yesterday.
Right,
So,
right.
and if there is a break of 3, 4 days, then again, that much more time.
Okay.
So, but
Hmm.
somewhere along the line, when I wrote the first book, it happened maybe after 2 years. Suddenly, the whole thing was clear in your mind. You knew
Okay.
all the characters, where they were, what they were doing. You didn't require a
Hmm.
board after that. Then the board was only
Okay.
for the editor's benefit to give, because the
Wow.
editor will ask you, it's only who's, what's the timeline, who's here, who's where, does this match, does
Great.
that match? So those, so that
Hmm.
of course you keep the record so that your editor's time is saved. But otherwise,
Okay.
the thing is, it's something like, if I keep quoting people, if you're into sports, any game, they play, let's say, game of
Hmm.
badminton. If you play a game of badminton,
Hmm.
initially when you go, you take a shuttle and toss it, and then it goes. Then you see other guy, jumping up for a smash, and then look, and you estimate where the shuttle is going to fall, and you reach out. But if you
Right.
play it long enough, then you will see that shuttle actually moving, where it is coming, and you will exactly put your
Ah,
your racket where it is. Now your whole picture
got
comes to you, and when you're reversing back, you know where the people are standing and where you should stand. No, that kind of thing has to come into your mind. So
it.
once that comes, yes, at some point it has to come, especially in fiction writing. Then only you'll be able to actually round off the story well. Otherwise, then of course you have to rely on your editor, and there's a lot of agonizing process if you can't get this in your mind. Similarly, in the second story, of course, it took me about 6 months when I started writing. Then suddenly the things fell into your mind. Then you're clear. Okay, you thought about a blueprint, but this is how it is. Right? So this character is there, that character is your time and space in your mind. But of course, you still maintain a whiteboard or its equivalent, maybe an Excel sheet or something.
Okay.
Because you need to, when you go to the editor, that he or she will ask you, okay, so what's your timeline? Which year is this? Which year is that? You're not mentioning it in the novel, but she would like to
Absolutely.
know.
Mhm.
So that
Yeah.
it is now. And in both my novels, I had followed non-linear timelines.
Okay.
So that means it's the first chapter and second chapter is not chronological. So timelines are different. So you have to be very
Yeah,
careful
yeah. Mhm.
till you bring them onto a common timeline.
Right. Because while
So
you're
that
writing it, you
process,
might still
yes.
have written it that way. Yeah, the editor definitely needs to understand.
Yeah,
Hmm.
so that when you mix and match and time events and place, so the editor, that's the
Right.
first question they'll ask you. What's the timeline?
Hmm.
Which year is this? Which year is that? So how is this
Got
matching? So how old is he or she? So how many years gap have you given? So
it. Yeah.
sometimes you realize that there are some unknowingly you would have left the guy is supposed to be 18, and but the time allows him to only 12 years.
Right.
So then he says so 6 years
Makes
difference. So those such kind of stuff.
sense.
But that care you have to take. So when you write down and keep detailing, so
Hmm.
you need, when you think about a plot, a blueprint of a plot, that needs to be in your mind. And when you build characters, so in my case, I used to have this as assimilation of the two together
Hmm.
initially, because sometimes you have to tweak the characters, then you maybe tweak the plot, then you
Hmm.
churn it as you write along, and then
Okay.
one fine day, somewhere 5, 6 months down the line, in my case, some people may get it the first day. Those who are able to see it through from the word go, fantastic, very good for them. I mean, that's phenomenal talent. But maybe it's a matter of experience. But without that, unless you have the whole picture playing out in your mind, it's difficult to round it off.
Of course. I mean, but this is very detailed. I mean, whiteboarding is where I wanted to start it with, but I kind of lost it halfway through, and I was like, no, wait, let me just, figure out where I want to go, and let's reach there, and the rest we'll do it on the way. So I could never reach the whiteboarding position. That requires a lot of discipline. Maybe with the next one, I'll manage to do it. So let's see. But
No,
this
you
is
should.
very
It helps. It helps you, and it helps the
interesting.
editor, because in the editorial process, when the editor knows that you have kept track of your basic time, even so that no
Right,
basic
right.
mix up, then they can focus on the research. Otherwise, they'll be cross checking this only for say,
Makes
which
sense.
year was this,
Yeah,
which year was that. It saves a lot of time
yeah. This
from
is
both
very
sides.
helpful. Very helpful. So, while obviously these have been like great tips on writing, but at the end of the day, most of us want to be published as well, right? So, for you, how has the whole publishing process been? What were the difficult parts? What were the watch outs that you'd keep in mind for your next novel?
So the first book was actually I mean, publishing the traditional method is, of course, to reach out to the publishing houses.
Mm-hmm.
And would like, when you speak to them, they say, they only one problem, that they don't have time to read.
Yeah.
So almost as a rule, they say, it's very difficult for them to read because they get,
Mhm.
I mean, if I'm to believe them, they say there are more people writing than reading in India.
Wow.
That's what some of they say
Okay.
that, because they get books by the hundreds every day, draft.
Hmm.
So some of them have made it even to say that, you should send print copies so that guy has to take a printout of.
Wonder what that says about our nation. I mean, that's really great if we have more writers than readers.
No, but the other side of the story, what they say is that, see, the basics. So what they say is that, okay, you're right. Now, normally they have laid down procedure of, let's say you write a book, they get
Hmm.
a editor to edit it, you do a beta reading, then
Right.
you format the book, lay out the book. So this basic process, if you follow, uh, then your product becomes discernible and kind of, let's say, easier for people to assimilate. Now, the challenge
Okay.
they say is that this costs money because when if you, let's say, write a book, you're a chartered accountant, so you can afford it. Not
Yeah.
everyone, especially the students who start writing and all, they may not be in a
Hmm.
position to engage in editor. It'll cost you maybe 30,000-40,000 rupees. You want a beta reading, another 10,000 rupees. You want someone to make a layout of the book for you the way it should be.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Again, another 10. So you have to
Hmm.
invest maybe as preparatory 60-70,000 rupees, and if you make a cover design, that is left.
That, yeah, depending on how
So what
detailed you
happens
want.
is what all these people say is that unless you have edited the book seriously and got the beta reading of the book run and your layout of the book done, you as an author, you yourself is not serious. Because what many of the
Hmm.
people say that I will
Okay.
edit and I don't want to spend any money, so I'll correct. I'm good. My
Mhm.
English is good, so I know how to correct. And most of them rely on our word software or whatever that software available for correction.
Right.
But invariably, as the guy who has written it or the girl who has written it, this your mistakes which you made, you will not see. It takes someone
Yeah,
else to read and someone else to read and see.
that often
Then
often
there are
happens.
personal biases which come in, and there are some what you call lines of freedom. Every
Hmm.
author thinks that creative freedom means you can write whatever you want, but even
Yeah.
that freedom also has got there's a kind of line you have to draw to know it.
Hmm.
Very often that is difficult for you to do without the help of an editor. So when
Yeah.
I speak to the publisher, also what they say is that this is a challenge which they face. So because of that, in the last about 10 years, when they're
Hmm.
moving towards literary agents, so
Hmm.
that literary agents will do the sifting of
Okay.
the reading part and send it to them.
Excuse me. Hmm.
So I guess yes, I remain to get into any of those leading publishing houses. It's not easy. So
Right.
that challenge will always remain, and I presume there is no solution to this because even if you go to the literary agents, they also have the same challenge. Somebody has to read it.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. They are
So
they are also as formed as the publishers.
they also have the same. So if the book is not edited, so many of the times what they do, they read a couple of pages, whether it's edited or not. They can always make out. So if the book is well edited, and if you
Hmm.
have taken the effort of getting it checked and cross-checked, so that's where the problem is. What they say now is because it's in you can sit on a computer or a mobile or a laptop and type a novel, and you do what is called a word editing. That means whatever the
Right.
Microsoft Word is said, that's your scope horizons of editing. And then what people take a shortcut, go to Kindle, so format it, upload on Amazon, download it again so that you get an Amazon checked version, and then send it out. It doesn't get you anywhere.
Hmm.
So that is okay. So what they're saying is somebody is passionate about writing. So all of us are passionate about singing. Doesn't mean you're a good singer. You're passionate about painting. Doesn't mean you're a good painter. So that's this part of who is a good singer or who's a good painter. That's where let's say, the auditing is done with the editor. So that's a challenge. That's one of the major issues which the when you speak to them, what they say,
Hmm.
so that many of the people who sent almost who will just send whatever they type out. Some of them do not even bother to edit it also. They think that
Oh,
my
okay.
product is so good. They say that let the publishing house read it and tell me it's very good, then I'll think of editing it or spend time on it.
You don't have
So I
time.
guess it's a yeah, I guess it's a passing phase. Maybe someday things will improve. And the second part is what they say is that they always 96% of the efforts are focused on the existing authors
Right.
who have already published,
I
and
agree.
it's only about 3-4% they allow for newcomers. So as it
I
is,
agree.
the full establishment and full system breaking in that has got its own challenges. I just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Let me put it that way.
Yeah. That's there. But I've also come to realize that because there are at least some people who are being able to break through. that itself is a sign, that there's hope. There's a bit of hope, of course. I mean, for those who've managed to break through, but yeah, what I've experienced is you require a ton of money and financial investment to be able to get through the whole process. If you want to complete it properly, because you meet an editor, you meet beta readers, even literary agents like the ones I came across, directly told me that, this is the amount you have to invest. And we might reach a solution that you and I both want by the end of, say, this year. So it's just, you go on investing with the hope that finally that day will come when you're out there, printed, published. So that's not affordable for a lot of people, even though they may be writing well, because they need to be guided somewhere. So I hope that guidance comes in soon, where people understand, why you're not being able to get published is also because, as you said, the publishers are so swarmed, and not always swarmed with good writing, also swarmed with writing where they need to make a lot of edits, or they need to ask people to understand that this is not yet readable, even if it's your best. So I think that's difficult, probably.
Well, yes,
Got it.
that sums it up. That's correct. That's correct. Yes.
Interesting, very interesting. So are you working on something else right now? I mean, you're done with two books, a third in the making.
Character sketching is going on. So I will maybe
Okay.
next time I'll start right next year. Next year is
Okay.
2022. I'll start on the next book.
Wow, that's
So,
great. And is
but I like character sketching as an ongoing process, so that'll continue.
of course, do you have like a file with, pages filed for each character, what you got, your thoughts in mind?
No, it's just you save everything on a laptop, so you keep on, you
Of
look at
course, I
them.
mean, I
You can
sound
just
very
really
old
keep it,
school
but
right now.
no, but then see, no, that's what you said is true. Some people take it as what is serious, you take a printout and keep. That's a degree of, like this is
Yeah.
what is very important. You take a printout and keep, for certain that I should not
Mhm.
lose it. So that's what I accept. But
Okay.
the thing is, that it's an ongoing process because, it's each today, each time when you, sometimes from a television channel, sometimes even from a WhatsApp forward, your friends
Hmm.
straightforward who keep sending you forwarding it without even knowing what they're forwarding. You do get sometimes some insight. You think, okay, it could be usable. It could be
Okay.
from so many aspects, starting with maybe ancient Indian history,
Right.
or maybe about events which took place at some point and some point in time. So
Hmm.
it's finally it's gathering that kind of information, what is relevant. The challenge is also, like I tell you, that you end up collecting a whole lot of should not become a junkyard. Then of course it's wasteful.
Yeah. Yeah. Then it's
Then
just
of
too
course
much
it's wasteful.
information. Yeah.
So that is up to you, and what you think is nuanced and what you think is usable in your style of writing,
Mhm.
the kind of
Absolutely.
information that is required. Then of course,
Very nice. Yeah. So I do have some, but again, old school. So I just like keep penning it down in a diary or something. Yeah, very nice. So, obviously, if you have to be a good writer, you have to keep reading, you have to understand the nuances, you have to understand the language because it's a skill. You have to, work on it time and again. And that's what I believe. So, do you also come from the same zone where, you read a lot? Because I think you mentioned in between the interview, you keep reading something or the other, you keep reading, right? So,
yeah.
would you have like maybe your top five book recommendations for us? Something we should definitely read, something that the young authors out there should, pick up.
No, the practical challenge I have faced is that when I started writing my novel in 2009, I've stopped reading fiction.
Mhm.
So
Ah,
it's
okay,
almost more than 10, 11 years I have not read fiction novels.
okay.
The choice was deliberate. The effort was to when you write, to be not influenced by anything that you read, even
Hmm.
unknowingly.
Right,
So of course I did not expect it to be this long. I thought you'll be able to churn it out like this, but then it's only when you start doing it you realize it takes
right.
time and effort. It takes time and effort.
Hmm.
So I need to write one more novel before I get back to my reading. So as it is,
Okay.
I'm already dated and I already have a challenge. So many people have been asking me that you're missing out on what's the current happening books. I said yes, I'm missing out. But it's a difficult choice. So I've
Hmm.
decided to come this way. I said, one more book before I get back to reading. That's one part.
You take for all
Otherwise,
of it.
but otherwise, I do read a whole lot of novel or
Okay.
newspapers, technical stuff, research on what you're doing. And I do write up on books. I may not read the books, but you keep track
Okay.
of write up on
Okay.
books, which comes on who's
Mhm.
writing on what type of writing, etc. So
Right.
the yes, I used to read before this. There was a point in time when I used to read a novel a day at some stage in life.
Okay.
So
Wow,
that's
that's
a kind of
amazing.
yeah. So that is this, when you do some fast reading and you decide you want to read novels
Yes.
which you like. So
Mm-hmm.
I've read across the spectrum, fiction,
Mm-hmm.
non-fiction,
Okay.
all kinds of novels, good, bad, and the ugly. Because it's only when you read the ugly you appreciate the good. So you cannot be only good. So
Right.
all kinds of reading. But and second, other
Okay.
part which I believe is, English is a foreign language to us. Anybody from India, however good you get, it still is a foreign language. So therefore, there is a certain amount of I would not call it limitation, a little more of the adaptation which I believe in doing, because I am a
Okay.
firm believer that yes, English as used by Americans or Brits or Australians, where they are the parent users. We in India, in our functional life, in your official life, in your working life, in number of places where English is kind of major part of your let's say the language or the lingua franca, you can call it that.
Right. Hmm.
But at the same time, so each of our place, let's say each place, depending on where you come from, which part of the country you're from, there is a little local influence which comes into your English study. Let's say, for example,
Hmm.
if you, first time I met somebody from Vizag, long back.
Okay.
So I asked him, what's the time? He told me 10 less 4. So I
Oh,
asked him, yes.
okay.
I said 10 less 4. Oh, thank you. So then I asked another guy, because I didn't know this person, somebody was a friend of mine.
Hmm.
I said, GB, who this fellow, I asked him time, he told me 15 less 4 or 10 less 4. Why didn't he say 10 to 4? So, no, that's, in Telugu we speak like that. So you would have just translated it in English.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, no, so this is, the kind of, so, but I said it let's say, conveys a sense. So to my
Yes.
mind, it's okay, even if you say 10 less 4 or quarter to 4 or 10 to 4, so long
Hmm.
as you language, the way, if it communicates better in that particular
Yeah.
area, since we are using English, no harm in it. Adapting what does make sense to you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So this kind of nuancing, the way we use language in India, many of the times, let's say, for example, people use the word risk to associate with, let's say, challenge. Many of the words are there, which are people are used in
Right.
each part of the country, depending on how the language is transformed. So that's, I'm not talking about purely English or, it's the language English, wherein people mix, Hindi into
Hmm.
English and, or Marathi into English or, I'm not talking about those kind of what I call fake poodling, but otherwise, whatever is
Hmm.
actually in usage, some of it you should
Right.
bring in. And the second part is uh, all our usages in Indian life. See, in every part of the country, there are phenomenal usages, proverbs and usages which are there in every language: Hindi, Marathi, Bengali,
Hmm.
Punjabi, to
Yeah.
every part of the country. But they will not, for example, make hay while the sun shines. Maybe a cliched English usage, but there are far better usages which go with the Indian context.
With our setting. Yeah.
Yeah, so one of my efforts has been I always deliberately bring in the regional languages and
Okay.
quotes for benefit of the readers also, because
Right.
um, our Indian languages are quite powerful.
Hmm.
So today, if you're using an English medium, does not mean that you need to lose touch. And in any way, life in India is led in our languages, whichever language is your parent language. You
Absolutely.
live life in Hindi, Bengali, Punjabi, or Marathi, Malayalam, whatever be it. You
Hmm.
never live a life in English. It doesn't work. You may, office space, you may do that, but your life is led in your mother tongue. So
Right.
therefore, it's always you must Indianize sensibly. I mean, very responsibly, I will say. I mean, that's not a
Got it.
freedom to
Hmm.
just throw in regional languages and make a mess of what you're
Yeah.
writing, but you have to bring in usages from Mahabharata, but, it doesn't matter, Mahabharata, Ramayana, Gita.
Realistic enough to know that, yeah, this is an Indian setting. This is how we talk in general. Got it.
It is required. It is required because
Hmm.
see, many of the times when you read, when you read the Western authors, so they use, let's say, European languages. They throw in Spanish, French, German,
Yeah. Like you're
Russian.
so right. Hmm.
quite used.
Absolutely.
Purely
Yeah, yeah.
purely from a number of people who use. In India also, there are so many languages which are used by more than 100 million people.
Hmm.
That means Hindi, Bengali, Punjabi, Marathi, Tamil, Telugu. They're all spoken by more than 100 million people. So, in its
Right.
pure reach, it's as good as any European language. 100 million people is not a small number.
I understand completely. Yeah.
So, I guess so. Then you can use it. And then, second, of course, is like in a place like Bangalore where you are, where there is always you talk to the working level guy, he has to speak three languages because he needs to
Hmm.
three,
Yeah.
four languages now. Because he needs to any of the working level guys, he will know the three regional languages, that is your Tamil, Telugu, and Kannada plus Hindi, and then you get a smart guy English. And they dabble like that.
And it's a very interesting phase, at least for Indians, where we're born multilingual. From your childhood itself, we are listening to more than one language, and we picked up. And this is despite Western, in most Western countries, people being just knowing one language, and they still manage to put in different languages in their books. So I think it
That's
just
true.
makes
So
sense that when they are, just well versed in one language and still putting in other languages, we shouldn't shy away from it. That makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, I'm saying provided it's relevant to your story. I mean
Absolutely, yeah. Everything according to
that's the
relevance,
core.
not because we have to do it.
So
That
in my
that
case,
would
so
be
I've been using that in both my books. I've a whole lot of. As my first book, I had fallen in love with that. The Himachali colloquial usages. So many of those
right.
such beautiful proverbs and writings and all that. So I brought them into the book in the
Mm-hmm.
classical part. So every book. Then second, of course, is
Great.
again to unfortunately for us, let's say today, you ask somebody, have you read Mahabharata? They have seen Mahabharata. I said, okay, you've seen Mahabharata on a television. Have you read the book? Oh no, I have not read.
Mm-hmm.
So see, finally, there's so much you can assimilate by watching a TV serial, or there is only so much
Absolutely.
because you really want to get into your mind, you must read.
Hmm.
So it is in many ways to bring out those things which are relevant. If your people are not reading the original text, at
Hmm.
least the wisdom should be passed on the important points. What are the perceptions?
Right.
How people differ. So that's for authors. I mean, each one to his own style. But I believe you should do that.
Great. This has been so, so helpful and this has been so great. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. And this has been a great hour. I have so many questions for you, so I'm going to reach out to you separately again. And maybe we'll have, like a good discussion on how you go about writing and how what I can learn from you, because this is very enriching for me. And meanwhile, please, all the people who've joined in, his book is available on Amazon. So please go buy his book, leave reviews. We writers love feedback, and especially when it comes from readers who've heard us promoting it and then they go and buy it. So please do that. Anything you want to say as last words to our audience today, sir?
My word to the audience is always, please read. That's all. Please read. Doesn't matter which book, but please read.
Great, great. So thank you so much, sir. Thank you. This was indeed a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking our time.
Thank you so much, Azzi. Thank you, and thank you for all the viewers.
Great. You all stay safe, take care, and I'll catch you again next week. Thank you, sir.